Welcome back, deep divers. Today we're going to be diving into something pretty thought-provoking. It's this lecture, The Evolving Self. Have you heard of
Oh,
that?
yeah, yeah. Really makes you think about how societies change and what role individuals like us play in that whole big picture.
Right. I mean, that's what we're all about here on the deep dive, getting those gears turning. So one of the first things that jumped out at me, the author, he talks about these transcendent values. Basically, he says, for a society to be truly good, it needs values and institutions that, go beyond just what each person wants. Like, it's got to encompass the whole planet, even future generations.
Makes you think long term, yeah.
Yeah,
He brings up this example about environmental damage, pollution, deforestation, all that, and how it impacts everyone eventually. The air we breathe, the water we drink, it's all connected.
yeah, it's that we're all in this together kind of
Wow.
thing. And it makes you stop and think, like, what are my transcendent values?
Uh,
What about in my own community? Are we really thinking about the impact of our choices down the line, or are we just like stuck in the moment?
He's kind of nudging us, I think, to look beyond our own little bubbles. Think bigger.
Totally. But okay, here's where it gets really interesting. The author, he's not so hot on voting. He actually thinks it's a pretty limited way to understand what people really need. Like, he uses the '92 election as an example.
Hmm.
Neither candidate, he says, really got specific.
Yeah.
So voters didn't have much to go on.
It's like choosing between two blurry pictures. You don't really know what you're getting.
Ah,
He's saying it's not enough just picking candidate A or candidate B.
right. So what does he suggest? Town meetings. Can you imagine
Mm.
people actually coming together face to face, hashing things out? He even points out how much money we could save,
Mm.
compared to, say, government programs that don't really help anyone.
It's about getting people more directly involved, right? Not just voting every few years, but actually shaping their communities.
Now, that brings me to education.
Yeah.
So the author, he dives into how traditional education, sometimes it just misses the mark. It can feel, I don't know, disconnected from real life.
Mm-hmm.
All those textbooks, abstract concepts.
Mm.
He thinks we need a more holistic approach where learning happens everywhere, not just in a classroom.
It takes a village, right? He even quotes that African proverb. The idea is the whole community should be involved in education.
Exactly. And to give us some ideas, he talks about these alternative models like Plato. He believed in physical training, sensory stuff as a foundation for learning. And then there's Huxley, who thought rock climbing could be a form of, get this, citizenship training.
Wow, that's hands-on learning. So it really gets you thinking, how could we apply those ideas, in our own lives or for the kids in our communities? How could we make learning more, I don't know, engaging?
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. The author also talks about how social change happens. And he says it's often these small groups of people, super committed people, what he calls creative minorities, who really drive the big shifts. He uses examples like the American founding fathers or the disciples who spread Christianity.
So it's not always top-down, right? It can come from anywhere, these small groups with a big vision.
But doesn't that sound a little elitist? Like only a special few can create change.
Yeah, it's a fair point. But he counters that by saying these groups, they can come from anywhere, any background. Think about those early Christians, right? They weren't exactly the elite.
So it's not about your status. It's about passion, dedication. And he also says you need both sides of the coin, what he calls differentiation, like innovation, new ideas,
Yeah.
and integration, which is bringing people together.
So it's not enough to have a great idea. You got to get people on board.
And to illustrate that, he tells this incredible story about the Key School. It's in Indianapolis. Basically, this group of teachers, they weren't happy with the way things were, so they decided to start their own school from scratch.
Talk about taking action. They didn't just complain. They went all in.
Oh, they were serious. They studied educational theory, visited other schools, figured out how to get funding, even dealt with all the red tape, and they did all this on top of their regular jobs.
Wow. Talk about dedication. And then there was a little hiccup. They had so many families wanting in, they had to do a lottery. And get this, none of the teachers' own kids got picked.
Oh, no. That's got to be tough after all that work.
But they kept going, and the Key School, it ended up being this huge success. Students were engaged, teachers loved it. It was this really joyful learning environment.
Proof that a small group can make a real difference. It perfectly sets up the author's next idea, evolutionary cells.
Oh, yeah. These are like little groups of people who, instead of just griping about problems, they actually do something. They gather information, they analyze it, they look at the bigger picture, and then they take action.
It's like a blueprint for For change, huh?
Yeah.
So what kind of information are we talking about?
Well, he says start with the basics. Like, what's the economic situation in your community? What are the power structures? What are the issues that nobody's talking about? He thinks if you can understand those things, then you can start finding real solutions.
Okay, so these evolutionary cells, they sound kind of cool, but how would they actually work, out in the real world? It seems a little, I don't know, abstract.
Think of them like mini think tanks, but like right in your neighborhood. So instead of just reading headlines and stuff, they would really dive into local issues, try to understand the bigger
So
picture.
it's about being like more informed, more engaged citizens,
Mhm.
but also more critical, right? Not just taking things at face value, but really like questioning the systems around us.
Exactly. And the author, he gives us this framework for how they could operate. He says you need four key roles: the economic specialist, the political analyst, the internal organizer, and then the integrator, kind of like the visionary.
I love that. It's like a team of superheroes, each with their own special power, tackling these problems in their community.
It's a good way to put it. And their main superpower is information, accurate, unbiased information. So their first job would be to gather data about their community, like the economic realities, who's really in charge, what issues are being ignored.
That makes me think about the media, how they can sometimes, miss the mark. It's all so fast-paced, so sensationalized. It's hard to get a deep understanding of complicated issues.
Right, and that's where these cells come in. They can slow things down, take the time to really understand the nuances of local issues.
But it's not just about gathering information, it's about analyzing it,
Mhm.
right? Thinking about the complexity. The author says you got to ask questions like, how does this issue impact the long-term well-being of our community? Does it create harmony or does it lead to, chaos?
It's about thinking long term. No more band-aid solutions. You got to consider the ripple effects of everything.
So they've got the information, they've analyzed it. Now what? How do they actually make a difference?
Well, he suggests maybe at first they work within the existing systems, like supporting candidates who align with their values, pushing for policies that promote complexity, sustainability. But eventually, these cells could start connecting with each other, forming networks, and that's where the real impact comes in.
It's like that saying, think globally, act locally, but like on steroids. You're not just acting locally, you're connecting with others who are doing the same thing.
Exactly. Imagine this web of evolutionary cells all working towards the same goal: a more complex, more harmonious, more sustainable future.
Okay, but let's rewind a bit. The author also talks about how we imagine the future. And it's kind of a paradox. Like in science fiction, we picture these amazing technologies, spaceships, underwater cities, all that. But the human element is often, well, kind of depressing. Dystopian, even.
Yeah, it's like we can imagine all this cool tech, but we can't imagine ourselves being, better people, more compassionate, more connected.
Like we're better at imagining gadgets than we are at imagining ourselves, actually evolving as humans.
Makes you think. And he also challenges this idea that life was somehow better in the past. He describes early 20th century Chicago, people living in these cramped, isolated conditions, working these mindless jobs, no real community.
It's a good reminder that progress isn't always a straight line. We've made incredible advancements, but have we really evolved as a species? Have we created a society where people feel connected, like their lives have meaning?
Those are the big questions he's asking. And he says it takes a conscious effort, individually and collectively, to move towards greater complexity. We can't just sit back and expect things to magically get better.
So how do we do that? How do we bridge that gap between where we are and where we want to be? He talks about a couple of approaches. One is that classic self-improvement route. Work on being a better person, contribute to your community.
It's a good starting point, right? Take responsibility for your own growth. Be a positive force in the world.
But then, he points out, it's tough to live a truly fulfilling life when the systems around you are messed up. You could be the kindest, most generous person, but if the system's broken, your impact might be limited.
Yeah, that's a hard truth. Sometimes individual action isn't enough.
Which leads to his second approach, which is actively working to change the systems themselves. Stepping outside your comfort zone, engaging in the public arena, tackling those big issues head on.
That's a lot more challenging, but probably more impactful in the long run.
He says the key to making real change at that level is, you guessed it, collaboration. Working with like-minded people, forming what he calls a fellowship of the future.
Right. It all comes back to those evolutionary cells. It's about recognizing that we're stronger together.
And he uses this really interesting analogy. He compares the rise of great civilizations like Athens or Renaissance Florence to the work of these evolutionary cells. He says those societies were shaped not by the masses, but by small groups of dedicated people with a shared vision.
So it's not about elitism. It's about the power of a committed minority to spark a movement that transforms an entire society.
But he's also realistic about the potential downsides. These creative minorities, they could become detached from the needs of the majority or even, become oppressive themselves.
That's a good point. And that's why he emphasizes both differentiation, that's the innovation, and integration, bringing people together. It's about finding that balance.
So it's not about forming some secret society and taking over, right? It's about creating a network of engaged citizens who are dedicated to understanding their community, finding solutions that benefit everyone.
Exactly. Collective intelligence, shared purpose, commitment to a better future for all.
This all sounds very ambitious, very idealistic, but you know what? It's also really inspiring. It makes me feel like maybe, just maybe, we can create a world that actually deserves to be called good.
It's a big challenge, but as the author says, it's worth it. It's about recognizing our shared responsibility for the future and becoming, conscious co-creators of a better world.
So wow, we've covered a lot of ground here. Individual growth, societal evolution, these evolutionary cells.
Yeah.
My brain is like buzzing. But okay, the big question for me now is like, where do we go from here? How do we actually do something with all this?
That's the challenge, right? And the author, he doesn't just leave us hanging. He throws out these thought-provoking questions. He really wants us to go beyond just understanding all this and actually put it into practice.
So like what kind of challenge?
Well, he asks, what information about your community, your social environment would be most useful for you to have right now? And then he's like, how could you go about getting it? It's like he's pushing us to become more aware of what's really going on around us.
So not just skimming headlines or, scrolling through social media. He's saying dig deeper, right?
Yeah.
Like what's the economic situation? Who really has the power? What are the issues that nobody's talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Become more informed, more engaged, not just watching the world go by, but actively seeking out information.
It's like that saying, knowledge is power. But it's more than that. It's knowing how to use that knowledge to make a difference.
And he takes it even further. He's like, what are the obstacles to greater complexity in your community? Like, are they economic, political, moral? Is it a lack of vision, lack of creativity?
Whoa. Those are some big questions. It's not enough to just complain, right? We got to understand the root of the problem.
Right. It's about moving from analyzing to action. Okay, we see the problem. Now what are we going to do about it? And for those of us who are ready to jump in, he gives us a really practical challenge. He asks, do you know 3 other people you could form an evolutionary cell with?
Oh, I love that. It's not so overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
You're not trying to change the whole world at once. Start small, in your own backyard.
It's doable. And he reminds us we're not starting from nothing. He asks, have you ever been involved in efforts like this before? What did they accomplish? Like he's saying, hey, people have been making change at the grassroots level for a long time.
It gives you hope, right?
Yeah.
Knowing that everyday people can actually make a difference. But it all goes back to that idea we were talking about, faith in the evolutionary process. And the author, he puts it so well. He asks, are you comfortable with the idea that the shape of the future depends on how you invest your psychic energy right now?
Wow. That's powerful. It's like our choices, our actions, even our thoughts, they matter. We're not just along for the ride. We're actually shaping the future.
It's a lot of responsibility, but also kind of exciting, Like you realize you're not just a tiny dot in the universe. You're actually a co-creator.
And he really makes us think about the implications of that. He's like, what consequences do you draw from this fact? How does it change how you see your role in the world?
It makes you want to, step up, do something that matters, be part of something bigger.
And as we're wrapping up here, he leaves us with this one final question that really stuck with me. He asks, if you've taken some time to reflect on these ideas, do you think your consciousness has changed in any way? Like, how would you describe that shift?
That's deep, man. It makes you look inside yourself and ask, how has this knowledge affected me? Has it changed how I see the world, my priorities? Has it given me hope, a sense of purpose?
I think that's what a real deep dive is all about. It's not just about learning stuff. It's about letting that knowledge change us, open our minds, inspire us to create something better. So as we come up for air from this incredible journey, let's hold on to those questions, those challenges.
Yeah.
Let's have those tough conversations, connect with people who are on the same wavelength, and let's believe that together we can build a future that's more complex, more harmonious, more fulfilling for everyone.
Keep diving deep, folks. Keep questioning. And never stop believing in the power of human potential to make the world a truly good place.